This is the Greg Bedard Patriots podcast with Nick Cattles.
This episode is brought to you by Prizepicks, largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Download the Prizepicks app today. Use code CLNS. Get $50 instantly when you play $5. Also, this podcast is brought to you by our friends at Notturno Home Services. That's Greg's home comfort company. If you're looking for a team that puts your comfort first, visit notturnohome.com/Bedard for 10% off your next service. Could save you up to $1,000. All right, Mike Vrabel spoke with the media today on a number of different occasions in Indy at the Combine. We'll go through what Mike had to say with a number of different outlets, but let's first start somewhere else. Let's start with free agency. Let's start with Ronnie Stanley, because it certainly sounds like, Greg, the Ravens are at least trying to portray that Ronnie Stanley is going to remain in Baltimore. Eric DeCosta, the GM in Baltimore, said he'll meet with Ronnie Stanley's agent at the Combine, expressed confidence in their ability to negotiate a new deal, potentially having a good relationship with Stanley. This is from Jeff. How do you pronounce his name? Do you know? Zrebiak? Zrebiak? All right. So Jeff Zrebiak posted that DeCosta said he will meet with Stanley's agent, knows there are no certainties, but he's confident they can get a deal done. Stanley is Ravens' clear free agent priority. And just a few moments ago, Zrebiak also tweeted out that not Jim. I was thinking like it's John, and then I said Jim. John Harbaugh echoed DeCosta's confidence in keeping Stanley. So, Greg, should we just wipe Ronnie Stanley off the book?
Not quite yet, but it's getting there. I mean, I've known Eric DeCosta for many years, and he's pretty much a straight shooter. I will say it's not quite a 180, but from the way he talked about it, and I think we touched on it at the podcast at the time, because we knew Ronnie Stanley was going to be a major piece to this offseason if he hit the market. Yes, he's had injury problems before, but last year, I was just looking this up, he played the most snaps in the league at left tackle, only gave up 2 sacks, gave up a decent amount of pressure, but also, when you're blocking for a guy like Lamar Jackson, who can be all over the place at times, some of those pressures are tough to gauge. But so after the season, at his postseason press conference, DeCosta was pretty cool on Ronnie Stanley about whether he would be back or not, and that was significant to me. And as we pointed out before, the Ravens are not afraid to let people go. They love to get compensatory picks. They game the system, like all that stuff. They also have, Rosengarten has the potential to move over to the left side, so they have options. But for DeCosta to come out and say that today with confidence, that means that they've had a change of thinking, and that doesn't surprise me. I remember, I forget who the player was, but this was, I don't know, I want to say like 10 years ago. But I think, actually I know, that they had a feeling that the Patriots, among other teams, were going to be hot for one of their upcoming free agents, and then all of a sudden they locked up that free agent. I forget who the player was. So that DeCosta, who's a straight shooter and doesn't really BS around, that he came out and said that today, I would put the chances of minimal that Ronnie Stanley hits the open market, which is disappointing from a Patriots perspective, because I think he would be the perfect stopgap for however long they need him for.
Yeah. The other guy that plays left tackle that's been brought up an awful lot around here is Alaric Jackson of the Rams. I haven't heard much about him. I haven't seen much about him being posted. It's interesting, Greg, because I think he's like 26 years old. He had a really good season, which begs the question why LA would be willing to let him hit free agency. Have you heard anything about Jackson?
So I've been making calls on Jackson, among other free agents. Obviously, the offensive line is my priority because I think it's going to be the Patriots' priority. I mean, I think after listening to Vrabel, they're going to be doing a lot of different things, and we'll get to that. But yeah, and I think we've talked about it. He's 26 years old. The Rams really don't have any in-house options at tackle. I don't, from what I understand, talking to one person, the Rams. Let me just look up that text thread that I had. This person said the Rams generally have felt like they can get by with offensive line on mid-level contracts. Guys like Whitworth and Havenstein didn't make much. Last year's splurge was an exception. If they think he's a good player, now they are going to have some, in-house intel. Thomas Brown here, plus McDaniels knows some of the guys, whether it's Cayley, Shaplinski. I will say this: I heard this from a couple of league sources calling around. I think there were concerns about Jackson coming out for. I don't exactly know what the red flags were, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was sort of like, motivation, how hard he works. I can't tell you for sure. I'm just guessing at this because I don't want it to get aggregated to say like I'm saying like he does. I don't know that. I know there were some red flags coming out Jackson when he was in the draft. And from what I understand, those are still a concern. So I would say that would probably be the reason why, we haven't heard his name. But now that Ronnie Stanley's off the list, probably maybe Jackson gets out there a little bit more. But I do think I think it's safe to say there are concerns around the NFL about Jackson. That's why he's not a hot name and being, high up on these free agent lists. Despite having a good year. But then again, now we know, Thomas Brown is here. Any intel the Patriots want, they can get from Thomas Brown. And so, if they go for him, that means Thomas Brown has signed off on him. If they don't, that means he hasn't.
What's interesting about Alaric Jackson is his arm measurements, which we're going to talk a lot about arm length, of course, like everybody is about Will Campbell. And I was just looking it up as you were talking, Greg. His arm length, his arm measurements, 32 and a half. So that's, a lot of people are wondering if the Patriots would take Will Campbell at 4 if he measures 32 and 7/8, let alone 32 and a half. So if the Patriots have interest in Alaric Jackson playing tackle for them on the left side, I would say they have to have a lot of interest in Will Campbell playing left tackle for them on the left side.
Yeah,
since if Will Campbell does measure at 32 7/8, 33 inch, whatever it is. Let's talk about Will Campbell's arms because it's a huge question, Greg. Obviously, we know where the Patriots sit. If you look across the NFL with these mock drafts, now I understand the nature of mock drafts. A lot of this information is going to change. A lot of mock drafts are totally wrong. It's more entertainment than anything else. Some of the best of the best get most wrong, if not the vast majority wrong. But if you look around, a lot of people have Will Campbell going to the Patriots at 4 with Hunter and Carter both off the board and Cam Ward being drafted by one of those top 3 teams as well. So Will Campbell, a lot of people I know, I've heard Giardi say this. If he had 33-inch arms, it would already be out there. The fact that it's not out there should lead us to believe that he's going to measure short of 33-inch arms. Just your thought, Greg, your personal thought on Will Campbell and this arm length conversation and how it should or should not play a role at number 4 for the Patriots.
So I reached out to a source in the scouting community because what happens a lot and what happens a lot for most prospects, especially guys who, are seniors or 5th year, have gone through the college thing. Now, I think Will Campbell declared early. So what happens is these NFL scouts go to college campuses and they do measurements. Like they'll have like a junior day and some guys will work out. They at least get measurements and stuff like that. So I was curious. I was like, has Will Campbell been measured before? And this person checked. And what's interesting, and this goes to sort of, what you were talking about. I'm just looking for the text. So in the spring, Will Campbell measured 6'5" and 6'8". That's how they do. They do eighths of for NFL measurements, and 319 pounds in the spring. No arm length. Did he refuse to measure his arms? Do they not do that? I don't know. To me, it's a big deal. Like if you're below 33 inches, like you better be an elite mover. I think Will Campbell's a good mover. I don't think he's elite in terms of movement. Could I see him getting away at right tackle? I remember when I was covering the Packers, they drafted, excuse me, Brian Bulaga, who had shorter arms, and he was only a right tackle. He was a pretty good right tackle. What's interesting is, of course, Vrabel, when he was with the Tennessee Titans, they drafted Peter Skoronski, 11th overall out of Northwestern. He was viewed as, I think, the best offensive lineman in that draft. There might have been somebody that went ahead of him. But he had 32.25-inch arms. They drafted him 11th. He's only been a guard in the NFL. Do I think that they would have drafted him 11th overall as a guard? Because it's not like he's Zach Martin or anything at this point, or Quentin Nelson. I mean, he's a good player. He's going to be a good player. He's going to play forever. But 11th overall, does that color? And I know there are quotes out there about Mike Vrabel talking about Skoronski's arm length at the time of the draft, and he had no problem with it. Yeah, that's when they drafted him and they thought he was going to play tackle. Now, and Vrabel talked about arm length today and, sort of gave a, wishy-washy answer on it. But I do think it's a big deal, especially in paramount when we're talking about the 4th overall pick in the draft. Like, that guy, if he better be an all-pro type guy if you're kicking him in the guard, and he can't be middle of the road at tackle if that's what you're drafting him for.
Yeah, Bulaga, by the way, 33.25-inch arms.
Really? I thought he was below 33. Yeah.
I mean, there's a quick Google search, so maybe it's wrong, okay. But 33.25 is what I saw. I do think Giardi's onto something when he says if he had 33-inch arms, we'd probably know that by now. Because you would imagine somebody in the Will Campbell camp would be pushing back on the T-Rex narrative and saying, no, he's got 33-inch arms. He's got 30. Hopefully some of you can watch the YouTube version of this show and watch Greg doing the T-Rex arms right now. It's fantastic stuff. I would imagine that his team would push back. Here's what Vrabel said today about it. You mentioned it. He said, quote, "The most important thing is how you use whatever length you have. So it's not the size, it's how you use it. If you're a long arm player that uses the length, then great. That's an added plus. If you're maybe an average length player that doesn't use the length, that would be difficult." So that's what he said. Myles Garrett, a name that's out there. Some people have wondered if the Patriots would kick the tires. The Browns GM, I believe, Andrew Berry, said that it's hard not seeing Garrett as part of the team, and pretty much said we are standing by our statement and how we felt from the beginning of this thing. Do you believe him, Greg?
Yeah, I do. I think if I had to guess, if Myles Garrett digs in, if he doesn't like what they do in the offseason and things like that, I mean, I have a feeling it'll be okay. But if he's disgruntled, this is the type of thing that, as we've seen with Matthew Judon and Brandon Ayuk, like you could be looking at a hold-in situation and him being like, look, I'm not practicing until you trade me. So I think it's a ways off. And, maybe this is another example of why, if you're the Patriots, maybe you don't want to shoot all your bullets because you never know what might happen down the line closer to the season.
Another interesting name today that I want to bring up and ask you about is Jonathan Allen. So the Commanders have allowed Allen and his agent to seek a trade. He's on the final year of his deal. So let's quickly just cover the stuff that I know people are going to be screaming at me about. He's coming off a torn pec. No bueno. He just turned 30 years old in January. He's looking for a new deal. So those pieces would make you believe he's not an ideal fit for the Patriots. However, I would kick the tires if I were Mike Vrabel, because if you look at Allen's game and his size, he seems to be the prototypical interior defensive lineman for Terrell Williams and Vrabel. Because if you look at it, Jeffrey Simmons is 6'4", 305. Jonathan Allen is 6'3", 300 pounds. So he's almost identical when it comes to size of Jeffrey Simmons. And Jonathan Allen is that kind of penetrating interior defensive lineman. And Greg, I don't know if you agree or disagree, but if you could bring Allen in, not have to give up a ton, and put him next to Christian Barmore, I mean, now you're starting to build this defensive line in a way where I think Vrabel and Williams would want to go.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, he's a good player. He really is. And I think the Patriots, and as Vrabel basically said all day today, they're going to be looking for good players, and they're going to be looking at every single avenue, whether it's free agency, which it doesn't look like it's going to be very fruitful, as we talked about in the last podcast, with the cap going up, and that's going to be bad for the Patriots. So they're going to have to look at every single avenue, especially the trade market. Now, you don't want to be giving up too many assets for a team that needs to get younger and a lot better. That being said, I think it's going to be a tough market for whether it's free agents at defensive tackle, trades, because like free agency in the draft, like there are good players on the defensive line available in free agency from the top, like Milton Williams, to mid-tier guys to lower guys. And then you have the draft. The defensive line, defensive tackle is one of the deepest parts of this draft. So if you're the Patriots, are you like, all right, well, we have all these needs, whether it's tackle or wide receiver or defensive line, edge, whatever. Like, are we going to give up trade assets for a defensive tackle when we could find, could just sign a guy or could just draft a guy? Or are we going to, use, if we do use the trade lever, are we going to save that for like wide receiver for, if DK Metcalf or AJ Brown or whoever becomes available?
I said this on the show I did for 98.5 on Sunday, and I mentioned this on my own podcast that I do during the week. A lot of people are kind of crapping on this draft, and I think it's a misunderstood draft because of that. People fall in love with drafts nationally, and they pump the tires of drafts when you have quarterbacks and wide receivers. And, last year was the perfect NFL draft for the media because you had all the quarterbacks, you had, 5, 6, 7 really good wide receivers. So it was a sexy draft. This draft is not sexy, folks. Okay. If this draft walked into a bar, it's probably about a 7, 6.5, right? It's not a 10, knock you off the bar stool kind of thing. So, when you look at this draft, though, Greg, you just mentioned it. Defensive tackle is ridiculously deep. Daniel Jeremiah said he's got at least 20 projected NFL, starters or at least players at defensive tackle. You listen to guys like Todd McShay and you listen to Jeremiah himself. They've got 12 to 15 guys at defensive end, at edge, that can be legitimate NFL players. So defensive line, running back, tight end, I would say even cornerback, it's pretty damn deep. And you've got a lot of good football players. So I think this draft is actually really good for the Patriots. 4 picks in the top 77. They have a bunch of holes, as we know, on this roster. So I don't look at this draft and just say, oh, it sucks. It's awful. There's nothing they can do. I just don't do that. All right, one last one before we get to what Vrabel said in Indy. Trying not to laugh. Cecil Lammey from Denver Sports in Denver, who has 55,000 followers, by the way. So seems to be pretty legitimate if you go by followers. He's reporting today that Rob Gronkowski would like to come back. He's entertaining a return. Denver might be in the mix. Why, Greg? Why?
I think he's bored. And maybe Fox isn't renewing his contract or something like that. I don't know. I mean, I just look, I love Rob and he's great. And look, do I think he can come back and play a role on a contender? Like, say like the Chiefs. I mean, he'd be a perfect guy for the Chiefs to bring in to sort of pair with Travis Kelce if he ends up coming back. But I don't really care. But I can tell you this. I am glad that I am not an indie, B, not working for a legacy media outlet in Boston, because I can just hear the assignment editors calling their reporters and being like, you have to go stalk Drew Rosenhaus to see what he has to say about this, because Rob is clickbait in Boston and in a lot of places. And whatever, if he comes back, if he doesn't come back, I don't care one way or the other. But yeah, I'm glad I don't have to report on this.
Stay retired, Rob. We all love you. Stay retired, my friend. You haven't played since 2021. You're going to be 36 years old in May. You have cemented your legacy as one of the best of all time. There's no need. Look, let me put it this way. I have no right to tell Rob Gronkowski what to do, right? If he wants to return, he loves the game, he wants to come back, he sees like 75-year-old Mercedes Lewis still out there and says, hey, I can go out and I can play a few snaps. It's your world, Rob. Do what makes you happy. This is me as media and also as a Patriots fan and a football fan. I hate seeing athletes wear out their welcome. And I don't want to see Rob come back and, look a shell of himself, can't get on the field, hasn't played in 3 to 4 years, turning 36 in May. I would just rather he just keep his legacy intact and not come back. But if he wants to come back, he's going to make that decision. And again, whatever makes him happy. It would not make me happy because I'm afraid of what he's going to look like, and I don't want to see that. All right, before we get to Vrabel's thoughts and Indy, Greg, tell people about your thoughts regarding Prizepicks.
Prizepicks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prizepicks had made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prizepicks. Prizepicks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. Think Jason Tatum will get more than 5 3-pointers this week. Jaylen Brown for more than 35 points. Cook up your hot takes with Nick Cattles and your friends and win real money this basketball season when you and your crew run your game on Prizepicks. Which players are going off, which ones aren't? Make your picks in less than 60 seconds to turn your sports opinion into real money all season long on Prizepicks. Love the app. Love playing this. It's so easy. Get in and out, and then you get to root for your picks in the game. It's a lot of fun. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, that's code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prizepicks, run your game.
All right, Greg, I'll read the quote, and then you could just fire off your reaction. Let's start with Mike Vrabel discussing roster control. He was asked who has the final say on the roster. Doug Kide transcribed this. Here's what Vrabel said, quote, well, I wouldn't be here, and I wouldn't have wanted to be the head coach here if I wasn't comfortable in my impact on the roster. So we want to continue to have great conversations with the personnel staff, with me, with Stretch, with coaching, et cetera, et cetera.
Translation, Mike Vrabel has final say over the roster, which we all have thought, and he's being diplomatic and playing nice, but the big man is wielding the hammer.
Yeah, baby. Yeah. This is translation. I got the hammer, and I'm dropping it. Dropping the hammer on all of you this offseason. That's what he's telling us. Vrabel also talked about the roster, Greg, and just mentioned that he was asked a question about McDaniels and Williams and how the players on the roster fit those schemes and what they want to do. And Vrabel said, hey, the roster is going to be vastly different in August than it is now.
Yeah, I mean, not a surprise. I said similar last night on TV. I mean, we were just talking specifically about the wide receiver room, but you know, the age of entitlement, which Vrabel talked about in his opening press conference, of you know, people getting free rides, about people you know, living off maybe past accolades or what have you. That's over with. Like, it's either you get the job done or you don't, and they'll find somebody to replace you. And I think what we're going to see is, you know, yeah, they'll do some shopping on the top shelf of free agency and trades and stuff like that. But I think we're headed for a free agency period where they are bringing in a lot of mid-tier, lower players and upping the competition on the roster. And then whoever sticks. Whoever's with the program is here. If you're not with the program, and, you know, I'm looking at, you know, guys like, you know, whether it's like Javon Baker. I mean, I think Polk will be here as a second round pick. I mean, but, you know, I don't totally rule that out. But, you know, I think they're going to bring in veterans. You know, they'll still swing at wide receiver for the top. They might bring in, you know, a number 2. They might bring in a couple more guys, sort of mid-tier guys, lower guys, and basically let people fight it out. And I think they are going to quickly reshape this roster to be like their types of players, which are guys who are going to grind it out, who want to be there, who love football, who want to be coached, who strive every day to get better. And, you know, like we heard Drake May did, was it Chris Long's podcast, where he was talking about Baker and Polk, and he basically said, like, in so many words, they weren't doing everything they should have last year to get on the field. That stuff's not going to fly with Vrabel and McDaniels and Terrell Williams. Like, those guys suffer no fools. And so people better up their game.
We got to get you to say Terrell Williams. It's the second time that you've said Terrence.
Terrence?
You keep calling him Terrence Williams.
Why do I do that? Damn,
I don't know. You better fix that before you stand in front of the man.
Yeah.
Call him Terrence. Like, write it on your hand if you have an interview with him. Make sure you get it on the back of your hand, like Terrell. All right. Let's talk free agency. Now there's two answers from Vrabel I want to cover, Greg. So don't jump ahead of me here.
Okay.
Let's start with the early answer, which was, hey, you know, that he was asked, what's your free agency approach going to be? And here's what he said. And look, this is what I typed up. It's not word for word. Deal with it. Hopefully aggressive. We want to be aggressive. I'm confident we'll be aggressive. We've started some of those conversations internally. Things are going to change. We have to be ready to pivot and adjust. There's going to be this high level where things are going to get done very quickly. That will then transition to some mid-range dollars. Then you look at opportunity. So he talked about money, opportunity, and then he said, we are in a position to offer both. Just your general thoughts on that comment, that quote from Vrabel.
So to me, that sounds like, you know, what, listening to it, and you know, hearing him say it, this is a, you know, not to, you know, cast aspersions on, you know, what went on last year, but this is a group that knows what they want to do. I think, you know, and this isn't unique to the Patriots. I mean, every front office goes to the combine with basically their game plans scratched out for, you know, what they're going to do in free agency and trades. And then they go to the combine and they meet with the agents and other teams, you know, to check in, like, let's check in on this guy. Is he available in trade? What have you? Like, these guys know what they want to do. And I think they're going to be aggressive. I think they're going to have very clear targets up at the top very quickly, because that goes as soon as March 10th comes. You know, they have the negotiating period, which is the 10th, 11th, and 12th. I mean, you know, pretty much most of the guys are, like, you know, locked up in the first, like, day or two. It happens quickly. And so the Patriots, I'm sure, you know, they are right now. They're trying to figure out what the market is, what these guys, like, say for some reason T. Higgins does hit the market. You know, I'm sure they're meeting with T. Higgins representatives, not only about free agency, but if he gets tagged, if he's traded, hey, what are you guys looking at for a contract? And be like, yeah, we're comfortable with that. You know, make sure you call us, because, you know, we're ready to go to the mat. And so they they very clearly are on their game. They know what they want. We didn't hear anything about burning cash or anything like that. We heard very specifically these guys have a game plan and they know what they want.
Apparently, Mike Vrabel kind of shares a brain with me when it comes to one specific analogy.
Oh, yeah.
It's the car dealership analogy. And maybe it's because my dad was a used car salesman for decades. But I always kind of bring up the car analogy when looking at free agency and say, well, I did this last year with Kyle Duggar. Like, how much are you willing to pay? How many cars are on the lot? How many similar cars are on the lot? How much those cost? And so Vrabel used that analogy today when he was asked if the Patriots were going to be comfortable paying a free agent maybe above their market. And Mike said, I like to shop like everybody else. When you go and there's only one of a certain car, maybe you have to pay more for that car because there's one of them. When you like 3 or 4 players in a certain role, you may not have to overspend. Everyone overspends sometimes in free agency. Simply put, Greg, supply and demand business, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that, look, we can even look back to last year. I mean, the Patriots, went pretty far on Calvin Ridley. According to reports, if Brandon Ayuk was available in trade, the contract was not an issue. It was about whether the 49ers were going to trade him or not. And the compensation as far as the trade and the contract was all, locked up. So these guys realize the position that they're in. They know what they have and don't have on the roster. And, if there is a guy at whether it's, it looks like wide receiver and offensive tackle, it's going to be very scarce. And if there are really good players there, they're not afraid to overpay. And they're going to be very aggressive.
All right, we'll continue with Vrabel's thoughts. We also have some stuff out there about Travis Hunter that I just saw that's very interesting that I want to ask Greg about. But first, Greg, tell us about Notturno.
As someone who spent years covering football, I know what it takes to be on a winning team. It's about reliability, precision, and showing up when it matters most. When it came to my own home and my heating system, I needed a team I could count on, and Notturno Home Services delivered. Notturno is local. They are family-owned and family-focused and have been servicing the greater Boston area for 15 years. From start to finish, they made the process of upgrading my heating system seamless and stress-free, and they go above and beyond, like swapping out valves for free to make sure I had heat for another 4 days until my furnace was installed. Nobody else does that. Notturno does, though. Notturno isn't just about heating. They're my go-to for plumbing, cooling, and even water and air quality solutions. They've got the expertise to handle whatever your home needs. Here's the best part. You can get 10% off your next service with Notturno. That could save you up to $1,000 on your next project. Just visit notturnohome.com/Bedard. That's NOTTURNO home.com/Bedard for all details and conditions. Take advantage now. These deals won't last forever. If you're looking for a team that puts your comfort first, visit notturnohome.com/Bedard. I trust Notturno. You should too.
Greg, when he reports about the Patriots, the last thing he's worried about is your comfort. I'm going to be honest with you. He's a straight shooter. He just tries to give it to you, whether it hurts you or not. Mm-hmm. So don't forget what Greg does on a daily basis. Boston Sports Journal. He tries to hurt your feelings, folks, what I'm telling you. But you want to push back, and he does these comments and Q&As. So check out BSJ, $50 for the year. Bedard and Giardi. Giardi's out there in Indianapolis right now. I'm sure he's going to have, steak and shrimp cocktail on Greg's dime, which he's pumped about. $50 for the year. So check it out. They do great work. By now. Also, download the Prizepicks app today. Use code CLNS. Get $50 instantly when you play $5. All right, before we get back to Vrabel's thoughts, I just wanted to throw this out there at you, Greg, because I just saw it thanks to Phil Perry reposting it. So Cameron Wolf of the NFL Network tweets out, Travis Hunter's main position is a hot topic at the NFL Combine. Now, of course, he's listed as a cornerback, but Burt Breer has reported that's really about logistics and an order of operation. He had to list as a cornerback so he could also take part of some wide receiver stuff he wants to do. So it's not really him proclaiming he's a cornerback, first and foremost. But here's what Cameron Wolf tweets. Brian Callahan and Mike Borgonzi, who are the head coach and GM of the Titans, said they view Hunter as primarily a cornerback. They have the number 1 pick. The Browns have the 2nd pick of the draft. Their GM, Andrew Berry, said Hunter's a unicorn, but they view Hunter primarily as a wide receiver first. So you get the top two teams in the draft. One says Hunter's a corner. The other one says Hunter's a receiver. I ask you this, Greg. If Hunter somehow, some way finds himself sitting there at 4, does position matter to you? If you're the Patriots, do you say, you know what? We got Christian Gonzalez. We don't really necessarily need a second corner, but this guy's so damn good, we got to draft him anyway. Or do you try to talk to Hunter this week and say, hey, man, we love you. We'd really love if you were going to be a receiver for us.
It's a great question. I would say this. I guess, I mean, I'm going to talk about it depends what grade you have on him. Of course, to grade him, you would need to give him a position. So you would pretty much know what you think he's best at. But I will say this, in general, no, I don't really care. I think that if Hunter is as good as people say and think, and I heard somebody the other day talk about this, and I thought it was interesting. One thing people should keep in mind when talking about Travis Hunter is that, remember, he played both ways, the entire game in college.
Yeah. Yep.
So, that maybe he didn't show as great as he could be on either side of the ball because of just fatigue. And also, you're not going to be able to really do both full time or even all that much part time because there's a lot of attention to detail. You're going to need to know whether you're a cornerback first. You're going to need to know coverages. You're going to need to know communications. You're going to need to know checks. You can't be in 2 meeting rooms at the same time. I think if he goes offense, I think it's going to be a package type of thing where he doesn't need to really study all that much. But in general, no, it doesn't really matter to me because, either way, even if you say, look, he's going to be great at one or the other, we're not sure yet. We want to take a look at him in training camp. I don't care if if you're the Patriots, if I'm the GM of the Patriots, look, if he's a cornerback, fine. Now I have 2 great cornerbacks. And here's the other thing. Maybe you think he's better than Christian Gonzalez. Christian Gonzalez could be in line for a contract extension. Maybe you don't want to give him that. Maybe you want to use him as trade bait or something like that if you think that Travis Hunter is better than Christian Gonzalez. I'm just giving an example. But in general, no, I don't care. I'll figure it out later.
All right, back to Vrabel. Personally, I've been I've been torn about this thing because part of me is they do have Gonzalez. Do you go for the embarrassment of riches and draft Hunter at 4 if he's there? Do you try to trade that pick because Hunter is what many people feel one of 2 blue chip prospects in this draft along with Abdul Carter? So what kind of trade package would be offered to you if Hunter's sitting there and you weigh it, okay, second great corner versus this trade package where we might be able to address a number of these different things. But I also understand that, again, he's one of 2 blue chip prospects. The dude's dynamic. He's a special kind of talent. And where the Patriots are with this roster, it's usually not good business to turn down special types of talent, at any point, especially when you're a roster like their roster. So I keep going back and forth on it. I change my mind almost every day. I have a feeling that'll be the case until we get to draft night. I will say, if the Patriots are in that position, my preference is to trade. That somebody really loves them. Yeah. Okay. All right, let's get back to Vrabel. He talked about, Greg, today, the importance of addressing needs in free agency before the draft so you don't feel like you have to draft certain positions, certain players, etc.
Love that. And that's basically what Belichick did for years here, where you could almost, like clockwork, look at, and I'll do it again every offseason, right before free agency starts. I put up a depth chart of the Patriots and I address where the weaknesses are and list them. And Belichick, without fail, would go through and sign somebody there to, fill the spot. And that way you don't feel like you could just draft best player. And that's when the Patriots and Belichick were when he was cooking with the roster and draft and develop and all that stuff. Obviously, they got away from it, but that is by far the way to go. In my mind, it's the only way to go.
Vrabel also mentioned that he's not giving up on the 2024 draft class, talked about revitalizing them, talked about, maybe it was a freshman 15 and they got to shed some of the weight and kind of start all over. I know you and I have talked about this. You and I might be the only people in Boston media that have this feeling, or we're not, there's not many of us. I'm not giving up on the class. Do I think there's a likelihood that all of a sudden Jalen Polk shows up and catches 65 footballs? Of course I don't. But I don't write any class off after their rookie season, especially given what those guys had to deal with last year with all the inexperience on the staff. The team was a mess. The offensive line was a mess. You started with Jacoby Brissett. So I'm not totally giving up on them. But what do you make of Vrabel saying that he's not totally giving up on them?
Yeah. I like it. I mean, I don't know really what the alternative for him to say. I don't think he's going to go out there and bury, kids that he probably hasn't even met yet. But I think that I think it's the right way to go. And I agree. I mean, while I'm not high on Baker, I mean, he's obviously talented and has, a lot of upside. That's why the Patriots drafted him. It's why they, I think, reached for him. But certainly like Jalen Polk, has the ability to be a good player in this league. I believe that. I'm not, burying him. I think there were a lot of things that went on last year, including, the coaches in that room. And I like how they're embracing these guys. But again, this goes to, there aren't going to be any free rides. Like daddy's home, Uncle Gerard's not here, or cousin Gerard, to be like, it's okay. You'll be okay. No, when push comes to shove, when they get going, they're either going to sink or swim. And if they sink, they're not going to be here very long.
I want to ask you this question because I was just thinking about this, and it was something I wanted to ask you a while back, and I never got to it. So before I forget again, I want to ask you right now off what you just said. Do you think Elliot Wolf underestimated the inexperienced coaching staff and maybe the personalities and character of some of the players that he brought in? Do you think he underestimated how that would mix?
Well, I don't know if underestimated would be the word I would use, because I'm not sure exactly how Tyler Hughes and Tyquan Underwood got hired. Now, I think Elliot was here when Tyler Hughes was here last time. Gerard was on staff with him. I don't know if Elliot underestimated it. I mean, I think he was just in the mode of, this is what we did at the Packers. We drafted guys. They had to be coached up. I expect them to be coached up. And I don't think that they were coached up this year. And so I don't know if he underestimated that or maybe just didn't really think about it. But what was the alternative? I mean, they needed to draft wide receivers. And so, whoever was responsible for that, like the coaching in that room, that was a big error.
I guess I asked the question because if you knew Javon Baker had some red flags, so maybe, when thinking about it in totality of we're going to draft this guy, he's got some red flags, did they just kind of overlook a little bit too much? We're going to throw this guy in there with these red flags with a guy who's never really coached the position and, might not have that kind of personality to deal with a guy like that. I just wonder, Jalen Polk, did they do enough? When Jalen Polk came out, everybody said he's got great character, he's dependable, and then things kind of went south with him for some reason. So I just wonder, if they would have done a little bit more digging into the character of these guys, the red flags of these guys, their personalities, what makes them tick. Maybe they look back and say, we should have done a little bit more work on that given the staff that we had. Mm-hmm. But maybe not. Maybe, as you said, it's, hey, we draft a guy, he's talented. Let's hope the coaches can figure it out. Super Bowl, Vrabel talked about it. I know Greg was jumping up and down when he saw this. He's dancing on the YouTube pod right now.
Yeah, you gotta get on the YouTube. You gotta subscribe to get my T-Rex arms and my dancing. Like
And so you come for the football talk. Yeah, come for the football talk, but stay for the entertainment. So Vrabel said, hey, look, the Super Bowl, it was clearly won at the line of scrimmage.
Loved it. I mean, it's the truth. And stop talking to me about wide receivers and weaponizing and Drake May that needs this. Like, you got to protect, you got to run the ball, you got to get after the quarterback, you got to defend the run. That starts and really ends with the offensive and defensive lines. And I expect, like we talked about a couple weeks ago from, talking to people around the team, they are prioritizing both lines. And that's the way to go. That's the quickest way to get competitive for the Patriots and to win games and to be tough and maybe even win playoff games. It's winning the game up front, especially in December and January.
Let's wrap it up with Vrabel's thoughts on Rhamnondre Stevenson. Rhamnondre has some issues holding on to the football last year, but we also didn't finish 2 or 3 blocks on the backside that allowed the second guy to come in and hit as he's trying to make somebody miss or he's trying to stiff arm somebody. We've got somebody that's not protecting the ball, and so it's my job to, one, show them and explain to them that, Rhamnondre, Dre has a job. He understands that, and trust me, we've talked to him about that. But we also have an obligation for the rest of the guys to protect the guy who has, whether that's Drake, Rhamnondre, and he names other guys, whoever we throw at everybody else. Yeah, Jalen. They still have a job. So I think this is critical because we look at Rhamnondre and we look at a lot of players, Greg, on this roster and say, all right, this is how we played last year. This is what happened. We just talked about it with Jalen Polk, right? But what were the other pieces that impacted that player? And I think Vrabel's highlighting that of he had 7 or 8 fumbles, but if the other guys were doing their job, maybe he doesn't have, 4 or 5 of those things, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I thought it was a really interesting answer. And, it's, once you hear it, you're like, well, that makes a lot of sense, but you don't really think about it in the moment. Not even me, who watches the film. And, sometimes, this will be something where I'm like, I need to look at this a little bit more. Instead of just being a fumble. I mean, I do account for that. Say DeMontre Jacobs. I mean, I know there were times last year where I split fumbles between Rhamnondre Stevenson and blockers because I'm like, dude didn't even have a chance. You got to give a running back at least, especially when what the Patriots were running last year with the, outside zone, a lot of that stuff. You got to give him a chance to get 2 or 3 strides to read the blocks. I feel like if he's trying to read the block and he's got guys all over him, it's going to mess him up. But I like Vrabel, and this goes to the Polk and Javon Baker comment. He's embracing these guys and being like, all right, things happen for a reason. But now we're going to correct things, but what he's not saying is if they don't get corrected, we're going to have a problem. I understand why things happened in the past, but that stuff's over because we're a real program again.
This answer shows me one thing. It highlights one thing because it's something that I think we know, you and I think other people know, maybe a lot of fans know. It's something I've highlighted in the podcast that I do since Vrabel was hired. And that's just attention to detail. And I'm not saying that Gerard Mayo doesn't understand what Vrabel's talking about. I'm sure Mayo saw some of the same stuff and said, well, yeah, they blew the backside block and blah, 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 blah. But everything you hear, Greg, about Vrabel is this guy is so in tune with every single detail. And he's just on top of everything. And this idea of what we can do with the attention to detail, which makes up the difference between maybe being a 6-win team and an 8 or 9-win team. Mm-hmm. One last question. I realized I forgot I missed this. So hopefully people stayed and continued to listen. Vrabel talked about Terrell Williams and Josh McDaniels. Mm-hmm. First, he confirmed what Greg Bedard wrote and said on Felger and Maz, which was they had numerous conversations. McDaniels, Vrabel, they spoke. Vrabel said he spoke to McDaniels numerous times when he was in Cleveland. So I don't know if you want to pat yourself on the back or add to that, but that's what he said about McDaniels.
No, that's okay. I mean, it's just, this, hopefully this whole, narrative about the Crafts and arranged marriage. And look, again, to go back over it. I perpetuated that because I went on Felger and Maz. It's arranged. I'm on every Tuesday. I went on and I couldn't get anybody to tell me anything different, so I could see where they were coming from. But shortly thereafter, a few days after, when I became informed, when I talked to multiple people, it was clear to me that that was not the case. There was not an arranged marriage, that these two had been talking for a very long time about working together. Whether it was going to come to fruition or not, couldn't tell. Where the openings were going to be and all that stuff. But clearly, I wish there were, not to criticize my brethren out there, because I understand, and they're under time constraints, like 15 minutes on the podium. They got them on the side for 15 minutes. Not great. Like, I really wish Vrabel just would have, before the combine, just do something here. Let's talk to Josh McDaniels and Terrell Williams. Got it right that time.
Nice.
And Jeremy Springer and the rest of the coaches. Like, let's answer these questions. Let's put all this stuff to bed. And Vrabel just only makes himself available for 30 minutes total. The first 15 minutes, the local guys got to fight with national people asking dumbass questions about how big staffs have gotten, and 2 questions. Whoever that young lady was asking 2 questions, because you get people there who are doing like these stories, these trend stories, so they're going around whatever. I wish the reporters had like an hour, because I think this stuff would have gotten hashed out, where I wanted a few more questions about McDaniels. Like, is it his offense, which I've reported that he is, and what that goes into it. Is he worried about? Does he think that it's too boring? Does he think that it's a fit for Drake May? Like, these are all questions that probably would have been asked if they had more time with Vrabel. But to your point, not to belabor the thing, yeah, this was no arranged marriage. Vrabel wanted McDaniels.
Last one for the podcast today. We've gone a little long. Hopefully people appreciate it. Terrell Williams, Vrabel said that the plan is for Terrell to call the plays. Your thoughts?
I thought, and again, previously, I didn't report this. I think I just said that I heard from some people, like the rumors were that Vrabel was going to call the defense. And actually, I talked to somebody who told me that, talks to Vrabel, and that they were going to play a lot of quarters in the back end. More zone-based. I thought his answers was interesting. Like, that's the plan. I mean, I guess it just could be an answer. I think he further said, like, he's going to call plays, he's aggressive, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, he couldn't have answered it more directly. Like, yes, like, that's the plan. What does that mean? Does he have more to learn before Vrabel's comfortable with that? I mean, because he's never called plays before. Do they want to see how it goes in the preseason and training camp? Like, it didn't sound like it was set in stone to me. I don't know how you read it.
Yeah, I mean, you could always change course when you say that's the plan, that's the intention, that's the expectation. You could always kind of pivot and change course. But I think that's the plan. I think that's what Vrabel wants to be done here, and I'm sure that was part of the selling Terrell Williams on the job and moving from Detroit and coming to here. And I would hope that's the case, because I do like the idea of Vrabel being the CEO. But again, when we talk about that, people are going to say, well, that's what you said about Gerard Mayo. I don't mean like, just kind of sit back and enjoy the show. I mean, having your hands in on everything. And I would imagine if Williams is struggling calling plays, Vrabel will be a part of that mix. But I like the idea of, Vrabel being firmly in grasp of, game management, clock management, situational football, talking a stretch. If he wants to go over to McDaniels and talk about something, he does it. If he wants to get to Williams, I like that approach. So if Williams works out as a play caller, I think that's the best case scenario. All right. Greg's gone. I'm gone. I think Greg will do a podcast for you solo after Elliot Wolf speaks tomorrow, which is Wednesday. The plan, it can always change. It is for us to be together again on Thursday to talk combine and anything else that comes out over those couple days. Everybody be well till next time.